Do Crohn's disease symptoms keep coming back? Tremfya guselkumab may help. At 12 weeks, rapid symptom remission was achieved in most patients taking Tremfya, and some experienced visible improvement of their intestinal lining at 12 weeks and 1 year. Individual results may vary. Tremfya is a prescription medicine used to treat adults with moderately to severely active Crohn's disease. Serious allergic reactions and increased risk of infections and liver problems may occur. Before treatment, your doctor should check you for infections and TB. Tell your doctor if you have an infection, flu-like symptoms, or if you need a vaccine. Explore what's possible and ask your doctor about Tremfya today. Call 1-800-526-7736 to learn more or visit tremfyaradio.com.
This is Prop Points on VSiN, the Sports Betting Network.
Hey everybody, welcome to Prop Points. Jeff Erickson and Nick Whalen here for the next hour, and we've got a lot to talk about. We're a day away from the NFL draft. We got NBA playoffs going on, 5-day games going on in Major League Baseball. We're going to have Alex Barutha join us in a bit to talk a little NBA with us. We're going to be talking play it or to bet or not to bet. Got to get my segments right here.
Yeah, very different from play it or pass it, Jeff.
Yeah, huge, massive difference there. We'll see if you can tell the difference there. But we're going to do NFL props on that one and MLB futures. And then, of course, we're going to preview tonight's betting slate for MLB as well. Let's let you know what's going on first, though, about in Major League Baseball. Got 5-day games going on right now. And starting off, first game underway was Braves and the Cardinals. This one is 1-0 in the 7th inning on this one here. Miles Mikolas versus Bryce Elder. Not the pitching matchup that you'd expect to see a massive, you expect to see a 1-0 game. In fact, it was minus, I think St. Louis is now a minus 130 and it's 5.5 runs. So that's the current line on that one there. But 1-0 run in the first inning. That was the only, and so far it's held up so far.
Yeah, Nolan Arenado with an RBI double in the first. You're thinking, okay, we got some scoring. Maybe we're going to get some runs on the board, 2 shaky pitchers. And yeah, that has not been the case. A pitching duel ended up breaking out between Mikolas putting that 5.7 ERA on the line going up against Bryce Elder, who hasn't been much better, 5.57 ERA for him on the year. But these are 2 teams that need wins, man. The Braves have started to turn it around a bit of late. They're 6-4 in their last 10. They've been good at home. They're 7-3 at home this season. And St. Louis seeking just what would be its 3rd road victory of the year. Cardinals 2-10 on the season. They have ceded second place in the NL Central now to the Milwaukee Brewers, who trail the Cubs by just a game and a half. Other games on the slate right now, Jeff, we got the most runs on the board so far, the New York Yankees, who have jumped on Luis L. Ortiz and the Cleveland Guardians. 4-1 Yankees in the 3rd inning right now. Yankees, of course, big favorites on the money line, live total up to 11.5. And, of course, the first thing that jumped out to me as I've been tracking this one, Jeff, Aaron Judge, man, keeping it going. He goes 4 for 4 yesterday, had an RBI triple early in this one. He's 2 for 2. That batting average up to .424 now on the year.
Yeah, absolutely. What a piker. It doesn't even have a home run today. I don't know what he's thinking. They're very lazy. But yeah, I mean, good luck trying to bet anybody else for MVP right now. It's really a case there where there is just no one else in the, even Bobby Witt, who's great. I just don't see any chance of anybody else getting a chance to win that award in the AL right now. Trying to look to see what his current odds are over at the for MVP odds are at the sports at the DraftKings Sportsbook, but
it's down right now because games are going on, of course. But coming into today, he was as short as minus 430 at FanDuel.
Yeah, that's and I see minus 325 now at BetMGM. Bobby Witt plus 750, so pretty huge gap. Gunnar Henderson, who hasn't done much this season, is at plus 25. He's the number 3 guy there. So you can see just a massive gap there between Judge and the field as far as that goes. Other games going on right now. Mets already beaten the Phillies twice this week. They are up 2-0 on the Phillies. That one's David Peterson up against Zach Wheeler, and the Mets have jumped up already. Brett Beatty with a home run in that one there for the Mets. Marlins and the Reds are tied at 2 apiece. That one's in the 5th inning there. Austin Wynns, who had a 6-hit game on Sunday in that 24-run game by the Reds, has homered in this one, his first start since then. He is the backup catcher. Matt Never Nervous Mervis with his 7th homer already of the season, a 2-run homer in the first. Brady Singer versus Sandy Alcantara in this one here. Watching Alcantara to see what he looks like. Only 2 strikeouts so far for Alcantara through 4. Something to watch there is like, he's a guy that should be dealt at the trade deadline, coming off a really tough start against the Phillies. We'll see what sort of stuff he can do the rest of this start and, of course, up into the trade deadline.
Yeah, I don't know if there's anything the Marlins can really do to change their tune as far as it making sense to deal Alcantara and really deal any veterans that they can get any value for. I mean, I think at 11-12 coming into this game, I mean, this has been close to a best case scenario start for the Miami Marlins. I know I thought they would be closer to, teams like the Rockies and the White Sox, who are, going to be pushing for well over 100 losses. And eventually I think the Marlins maybe fall closer to that category, but I think they've been a lot more competitive than most expected so far.
Yeah, absolutely. The money line on that one is Reds -160, Marlins +124. Right now, total 8.5 on that one there. We'll see what happens the rest of that game. One more game going on. Tigers up 1-0 on the Padres. Gleyber Torres with a home run in that one. Reese Olson versus Kyle Hart. Both are striking a good number of batters. Olson with 5 Ks through 4. Hart with 6 Ks through 3 2/3. So both pitchers dealing in that one there. Fernando Tatis got caught stealing for the first time all season in that game as well. So Padres had a nice little win yesterday. They sit at 17-7, still, tied with the Mets for best record in the National League so far. So, tremendous start by the Padres, despite losing half their roster to injury.
Yeah, I think that's what makes it even more impressive. I mean, 17-7 on the year, done a lot of their damage at home. They are a sub 500 team on the road, but the injuries stacking up all over this roster, and it just hasn't really mattered so far. We'll see if they can get something going. Just one hit now as we move to the bottom of the 4th in that game. And if you're thinking about jumping on the Padres, if you think they can get something going offensively, +200 right now on the live money line at TK.
Right. Before we recap what happened in the rest of sports last night, including the NBA and Nick's detailed breakdown of the NHL hockey playoff slate there. First, are you still using your buddy's gut instinct as your betting strategy? Come on, you deserve better. RotoWire has the real tools the pros use: rankings, projections, updates, and data that doesn't sleep. Whether you're making picks, setting your fantasy lineup, or placing bets, our award-winning insights give you the edge you need. Get started today by heading over to RotoWire.com and entering Roto15 at checkout for 15% off any RotoWire product. Nick, before we get into breaking down the NBA, real quick, what do you see? Are you going to see more movies this year or more hockey games this year? What's the play it or pass it?
Well, I did watch I forget what it was even called, like whatever the cup thing was that they did over the All-Star break. Like I did watch the full final game from start to finish of that. So I don't think I've watched a single movie yet this year. So hockey has a commanding lead right now because the over-under for movies watched in any setting, whether it's a theater or at home, is probably at 0.5 right now. So hockey's got to be like -160, I think, as the favorite. I'll probably catch a game here or there throughout the playoffs. I usually tune in for the Stanley Cup Finals. I really don't foresee myself watching really more than 1 or 2 movies the rest of the year. There's been enough hype around the Sinners movie, Jeff, that is one that I'll probably make a point to see once it's available through some various internet back channels. I'm not a movie theater guy, but as of right now, I would say it's more likely that I watch more minutes of hockey than I do minutes of movies this year.
Okay. And we can do it by minutes, by completion. There's a lot of different ways we could attack that there. But anyways, the betting public needs to know these things. Yeah. NBA wise, 3 games that weren't super close. They had their moments where it looked like it was going to be, it could turn, but it didn't. Let's start off with the nightcap game. Timberwolves and Lakers. Lakers held a lead all the way through. They tried to make it close in the fourth quarter. They missed 10 shots in a row in the fourth quarter at one point in time. Yet they held on. A comfortable win. They win 94-85 in that one there. Series is now tied. It's back. I think they're back to minus money for the series as well.
Yeah, and we talked about that yesterday. When you're looking at some teams to make the Western Conference Finals odds, you don't want to overreact based on what we saw in Game 1. And I still think the Lakers are now kind of back in the driver's seat to win the series. Obviously, you got to go play the next 2 in Minneapolis. Even if you split there, you got home court the rest of the way. I think this has felt like a 6 or 7 game series, even going in, and the Lakers are now minus 115 to win the series at DraftKings. Timberwolves still hanging around at minus 105, and they are 3-point home favorites for game 3 later this week. But I mean, this game was night and day compared to what we saw in game 1, especially defensively for the LA Lakers. We talked a lot about the picking and choosing. If you try to shut down Anthony Edwards, if you try to wall him off, what else are you giving up? The Lakers were kind of able to accomplish both last night. I thought they did a good job on Edwards. He said after the game he was quote confused by the defenses they were throwing at him. I think that's exactly what you want to hear if you're JJ Redick and the Lakers. I was really impressed, with the ability to kind of switch on the fly to his zone when they needed to. That certainly threw the Timberwolves off. But we also talked about Minnesota's shooting in game 1, 19 of 27 on wide open threes. For one, the shot quality was significantly worse last night. And 2, they weren't even knocking down the open threes that they did generate. Minnesota just 5 of 25 from beyond the arc. And as you alluded to, the Lakers kind of messed around for a while. They missed 10 straight shots. They started playing a little bit of hero ball with Luka and LeBron in the fourth quarter. Minnesota had an opportunity to make a run, but could just never string those baskets together. So pressure's now a little bit off the Lakers. Had they lost last night, you go to Minnesota down 0-2, that gets pretty perilous. But I feel like the Lakers are now back in control of this series and feeling a lot better about their defensive plan.
Indeed. Defense is the point that you were stressing a little bit when we were discussing Pacers and Bucks. I know a lot of talk about the bad blood there, the talk about Dame returning. The problem for the Bucks is their defense hasn't returned yet. Still able to score pretty readily. 123, 115 in this one here. The series will go to Milwaukee with the Pacers up 2-0.
Yeah, we'll talk a little bit more about this one with Alex Barutha later in the show. He'll have some thoughts as well. But yeah, Milwaukee did what it needed to offensively. Shot 51% from the field, shot 40% from 3, got a great game from Bobby Portis. Just didn't matter. Gave up a 127 offensive rating to the Pacers. That offensive rating was in the 170s early in the second quarter. And I don't know what the defensive counter is for the Bucks. There aren't a lot of great defensive players on this roster.
Agreed. By the way, scoring update, Atlanta has tied that game against the Cardinals 1-1. They're in the 8th. To bet or not to bet, coming up next on Prop Points.
There are some things in life that just shouldn't be forgotten, like bringing your keys when you leave the house, setting your fantasy lineup, and most importantly, having Hidden Valley Ranch to watch the game. Especially if wings are on the menu. Those creamy, zesty Cool Ranch flavors take each spicy, savory bite to an unforgettable level. Hidden Valley Ranch, only serious about flavor.
You're watching Prop Points on VSiN, the sports betting network.
It's time now for our award-winning To Bet or Not to Bet segment coming up here on Prop Points. Jeff Erickson, Nick Whalen here. We're going to start off NFL draft style, and then we're going to move on and talk a little bit about the some MLB futures as well for To Bet or Not to Bet. Let's start off. Jackson Dart, second quarterback drafted at plus 200. To bet or not to bet, Nick Whalen?
Yeah, I think we've talked through basically every variation of a Jackson Dart prop bet for the NFL draft tomorrow. And, earlier in the week, I was kind of hot on this idea of Jackson Dart landing with the New Orleans Saints. I still think that's a possibility, although it is looking to me less likely that would happen at number 9. Now, with the Saints risk trading back and, a team perhaps leapfrogging them, if Jackson Dart is in fact the target, we will see. I still wouldn't be shocked if they just say, all right, this is our guy. We're going to make the pick at number 9, but he's 2-1 to be the second quarterback off the board. And it's actually, as I look at it live now, down to plus 185 at DraftKings. His draft position is 24.5, and the over, meaning it would be later than that, is minus 200. The under plus 155. He's also plus 550 to go in the top 10. The Saints to take a quarterback is 4-1. So we have all kinds of information flowing in on this. But Dart to be the second quarterback drafted, to me, I think there's the least amount of variance here. It's really just depending on what a teams think of Shedeur Sanders. And the more information that we're getting on Shedeur Sanders, the closer we get to the draft, is that most teams seem to be out. Most teams seem to be kind of put off, whether it's his personality, whether it's the entitledness. We'll see how true that actually is, or some of it is just straight up his tape and his football ability. I think the New York Giants are the team you'd have to worry about. I don't know that they would take him inside the top 3. That could be another team that would look to trade down or trade back into the first round. The Steelers could be in the mix, but to me, Jeff, it's still most likely that Jackson Dart is the second quarterback off the board. I don't see him potentially falling into round 2, whereas to me, there's a pretty realistic world where that could happen for Shedeur Sanders.
Yeah, absolutely. I could definitely see that. I feel like there's some Will Levis potential for both of these quarterbacks. Like we get all this buzz. Oh, he's moving up. And then that's all a smokescreen. Sometimes it's the player you don't hear about that when nobody's talking about a player, that means they're all secretly quietly on a guy. I wonder if that could be, some of the action there. Let's move on to the next one. Steelers to draft a quarterback at all. Plus 220. To bet or not to bet?
Well, this is the Steelers to draft a quarterback with their first pick in the draft.
With their first pick.
Certainly be, this is first Steelers draft pick has to be a quarterback. So if you look at the team by team breakdowns, the Steelers to take a defensive lineman or an edge rusher is still the quote unquote favorite at DraftKings. That's plus 140. So to me, it's similar to the Saints in some ways, although they're obviously picking later in the draft. It's conceivable that the Steelers could go, non-quarterback, go defense maybe with that first pick in round 1 at 21. And then, you hear a lot about, well, would they trade back into the first round? Would they try to trade up in the second? There have been some reports around that, even just in the last 48 hours. But keep in mind, the Steelers have limited draft capital. They don't have a second round pick in this draft, thanks to the DK Metcalf trade. So I could see a scenario where perhaps they do trade out of that pick at 21. They try their luck on a quarterback, perhaps in round 2. You try to pick up as much draft capital as you can. I think given the value here at plus 220, it might be worth a shot. I wouldn't put much on it. Again, trading back does introduce some risk, especially if you have a true target, a quarterback that you want. But, they've also been linked to someone like Jalen Milroe. And, maybe if they feel like it's a better equation to move back, to pick up some capital, and you settle for someone like Milroe as opposed to Shedeur Sanders, I think there's a case that makes more sense for the Steelers. So I think they take a quarterback. I'm just not sure it's their first overall pick.
Yeah, the Steelers might have the worst quarterback room in the NFL right now, which is wild.
Yes.
They've got about, I was checking it over the cap. They've got about effective $28 million in cap room before the draft. Obviously, a lot of that's going to be allocated after that, and we're still waiting. Oh, they only can go Aaron Rodgers. Well, what if they got to have a contingency? What if Rodgers doesn't sign? Do they put him in any sort of deadline? Maybe they're thinking about trading for Kirk Cousins, but they have to work out the cap manifestations of that as well. Lots of, their options are getting diminished. So it's an interesting debate there what the Steelers should do. They've gone so many years without their long-term quarterback set. It really is a fascinating question. They're never drafting super early either. So it's a really tough spot for them. One more to bet or not to bet NFL draft style. Over 2.5 running backs drafted in the first round at plus 170. To bet or not to bet, Nick?
This is one I actually really like. And, I'd like to be getting a little more value, but I think plus 170 is fair. And, if you canvass a bunch of mock drafts, sometimes you'll see 2, sometimes you'll see 3, sometimes you'll see 4 running backs in the first round. But I'm inclined to think that we get 3. We know Ashton Genty for sure. Omarion Hampton, not a lock, but, getting there. His over-under draft slot is 19.5. He's minus 1,600 right now at DraftKings to go in round 1. So I think we can set those 2 aside. Then it comes down to me to the 2 Ohio State backs, Travion Henderson, who is minus 115 to go in round 1. And then Quinshon Judkins, who we talked about yesterday with the guru, John Hansen. That was one of the long shots that he's looking at, 18-1 right now to be a first round pick. Obviously, to me, it's more likely that Henderson would be that guy. But as far as this bet is concerned, we don't really care. If a team really likes Quinshon Judkins and they take him instead of Travion Henderson, that's fine. We just got to get to that number 3. I just think there are enough potential landing spots at the end of round 1 where, let's say Denver takes Hampton at 20. I think there are a bunch of teams that would consider it. Houston at 25. You can make a case for Minnesota at 24 even, but they have limited draft capital. You probably don't burn a first round pick on a running back. Washington at 29. Buffalo, perhaps, if they were to look to move James Cook at 30, and then Kansas City at 31. So to me, it's pretty likely that at least one of those teams would pull the trigger on Henderson or Judkins.
Yeah. By the way, editorial note, it'd be wild for the Bills to trade James Cook. I know he wants to get paid and all that. He was so effective down the stretch, such a difference maker when they had him. I think that I understand. There's financial reasons for everything, but it seems wild to me.
Yeah, I mean,
Anyways.
I think it would be totally financial, right? You have Ray Davis. You could basically reset. You could save a lot of money. You could bring in another really good running back who, in theory, could be just as good as James Cook. I think the bigger hurdle to me is who's taking James Cook. What are you getting back for him? Is that part worth it, or is it essentially just a full-on salary dump? But I could certainly see the Bills doing it.
For sure. We've been talking about to bet or not to bet some of these NFL draft props. The NFL draft is one of the few betting events where research beats reputation, and VSiN Pro helps you cash in. Right now, get VSiN Pro access through August 1st for just $59. A full summer of sharp betting insights at half the regular price. With VSiN Pro, you'll get daily best bets, including sharp insight into NFL draft props, real-time betting splits from DraftKings and Circa, 24/7 video access on the VSiN Watch app, full access to VSiN.com's analytics, betting trends, and expert breakdowns. From the draft to the Derby and beyond, every sport, every edge, one low price. Sign up now at VSiN.com/subscribe. That's VSIN.com/subscribe.
All right, Jeff, it's my turn to ask you a couple to bet or not to bet questions. We're going over to Major League Baseball, and we are going to the NL East to bet or not to bet the New York Mets to win the division plus 100 right now.
Scoring update in that Mets game, by the way, it's now 2-2 in that game. Mets have a 4-game lead going into this series against the Phillies into today's game at 17-7. The Braves have pretty much played themselves out of consideration for the NL East. They're 7.5 games out. The Mets, I mean, they're doing this well. They're 17-7, 4 games up, yet they haven't had Frankie Montas, Sean Manaea, or Francisco Alvarez do anything. Juan Soto hasn't got off track yet. He's hitting 233, 362, 395, 3 homers so far. I think better things are still coming for the Mets. I think they've got a farm system that can allow them to make some trades if need be as they get closer to the trade deadline. Nick, I'm going to bet this. I think this is a decent enough price for a team that I think is really strong. It's a team that made it to the NL, NL Championship Series against the Dodgers last year. I think they're close enough to be competitive for that next step, and I think they do win the NL East. So I'll bet it.
Okay, there we go. 1 for 1. Let's move over to the AL Central. Talk some Detroit Tigers, who currently lead the San Diego Padres 2-0. We're in the top of the 6th there. The Tigers, despite sitting in second place right now, a half game behind the Guardians, are the favorite to win the AL Central. Guardians are plus 250, Tigers plus 115. To bet or not to bet on Detroit to take the AL Central?
No, I think this is interesting. I don't like the price on this one here. That not just that they're a half game behind the Guardians coming in, but they're getting half as good odds as the Guardians at plus 250. Guardians have played so many more games on the road already. They're 7-1 at home, 7-8 on the road. They played their first 9 games on the road. One negative note about Cleveland, Emmanuel Clase, their closer, dealing with shoulder issues there. We'll see about that. But Detroit also hasn't had Parker Meadows all year. Maybe another month out. Kind of think they're overachieving a little bit. Casey Mize is one of those guys that does that. If you look at ERA indicators, I think it's a 2-team race. I think the Twins have played themselves out of it already. And yet I don't like the price. So I'm going to say not to bet.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I think the Guardians should be closer to even right now with the Detroit Tigers as far as those odds are concerned. Kansas City still hanging out 4.5 games back in the AL Central. All right, we're going to turn our attention back to the NBA. When we come back, our senior NBA editor at RotoWire, Alex Barutha, joining us next on the Progressive Guest Line. You're watching Prop Points here on VSiN.
NetCredit is here to say yes, because you're more than a credit score. Apply in minutes and get a decision as soon as the same day. Loans offered by NetCredit or lending partner banks and serviced by NetCredit. Application subject to review and approval. Learn more at netcredit.com/partners. NetCredit. Credit to the people.
You're watching Prop Points on VSiN, the sports betting network.
Welcome back into Prop Points here on VSiN. Nick Whalen, Jeff Erickson with you, taking you up to 3 p.m. Eastern. Make It Rain with Adam Shine, of course, coming up next on the network. Give you a quick reset on what's going on in Major League Baseball. 5-day games happening right now. Cardinals, Braves. Atlanta's even that one up at 1. We are in the bottom of the 8th. 16 hits in total, 2 runs in total on the board in what has turned into somewhat of a pitching duel in Atlanta. Reds up 3-2 on the Miami Marlins. We are about to head to the bottom of the 6th there. End of the 4th inning, Yankees up 4-1 on the Guardians. As we mentioned, Aaron Judge already with a couple of hits, including a triple. And we are heading to the bottom of the 5th out in New York. Mets, Phillies knotted up at 2. Tigers still leading the Padres in the bottom of the 6th, 2-0. We got a friend, Alex Barutha, our senior NBA editor over at RotoWire, joining us on the Progressive Guest Line. You can check him out on Twitter at BaruthaAlex. Alex, a lot going on in the NBA. We had 3 games last night. We got 3 more games tonight. We'll get all your picks and your props for tonight's slate in a bit. But I want to start with what we saw last night. And we'll talk Lakers, Wolves. We'll talk some Pacers, Bucks. Hopefully you have some ideas for how Milwaukee can do anything defensively. But the one game we didn't touch on earlier in the show, OKC. Taking it to the Grizzlies again. Thunder now 6-0 against the Grizzlies this season. They've won all 6 of those games by at least 13 points. It wasn't as ugly as game 1, but never really felt like Memphis had a chance.
You're right. Memphis tried to make themselves heard in the third quarter. But yeah, ultimately, some of it is like Memphis was getting some open shots and missing them. But at the same time, like OKC is putting so much defensive pressure on them and making them work so hard that I feel like these Grizzlies guys are just gassed at this point. They're getting out rebounded. They're turning the ball over way too much. I would bet the sweep. I would bet the sweep. I wouldn't overthink it.
Yeah, you can get that sweep. I think. What can you? It's
minus
pretty good money now. I mean, Nick called this one earlier here on the sweep with the Memphis the Memphis OKC odds. I think it's what now game. I think it's like plus. Was it?
It's
really,
minus 185 right now. We played it at minus
185. That's crazy. I was looking at it, I stammered because I was like minus money. Okay, it's not even good money now to get that sweep odds.
I would still play it. I gotta be honest with you. I would still play it. Maybe Memphis can, make a competitive game in game 3 at home. Your back's against the wall to some extent. But if you're betting the whole series, I would just go sweep.
All right, let's dig in on Pacers Bucks, Alex. I've delayed it enough. Pacers, of course, take a 2-0 lead last night. A little more encouraging effort from the Milwaukee Bucks, but this team has an issue starting games, starting halves, coming out of timeouts. It just felt like anytime there was some momentum for Milwaukee, the Pacers always had an answer. They were one step ahead. Milwaukee, to me, just feels out of answers defensively. And it's a little bit scary that they had the 3-point shooting night that they did. They shot over 50% from the field. Bobby Portis gave you an absolute best case scenario game off the bench. And yeah, Milwaukee, had its opportunities late to potentially steal this game, but Indy was in control from start to finish. I want to ask you about Damian Lillard, though, specifically. Played a lot more minutes than you and I expected. 37 minutes, was still a little bit timid, clearly not 100%. What version of Dame do you expect to get in game 3? Is it enough that can really change the series?
I wouldn't be surprised if Milwaukee came out and won game 3. You get Dame his sea legs back. Milwaukee's been a very good home team, at least relative to how they are on the road all season. And again, a lot of times when teams get down 0-2 and then go home, there's some sort of bounce back game. But the problem with Lillard here is just the Pacers have an answer for him. Like he really struggles against the Pacers, whether it's they throw Nembhard on him, they can switch Nesmith onto him. The Pacers just kind of have an answer. And obviously he's not very good defensively. He's worse than usual because he hasn't played for so long. And the Bucks' main problems right now are their defense. Giving up a ton of open threes every possession. They've also been forcing no turnovers. That's been the case for a long time for Milwaukee, not just this season. And then to even stay in this game, like obviously Giannis has been playing excellent in this game, but to even stay in this game, Kyle Kuzma had to have he quote unquote took over in the third after being irrelevant in the first game, and then KPJ made some tough buckets. It just does not feel sustainable for Milwaukee to stay in the series for the long haul.
What, if any, adjustments can they make? I know there's some discussion about maybe altering the starting lineup. There isn't really a defensive-minded player unless you want to dig up Jackson or something like that.
There isn't, and Lopez only played 16 minutes in game 2.
Yep.
So they're already having to potentially phase out Lopez, who is one of their best offensive players and one of their best defensive players. Now I think he's a bit overrated on defense, and this is not the right series for him. But the Bucks just don't Andre Jackson's not that good. Ryan Rollins not that good. I mean, these guys are honestly barely NBA players, and these are the guys we're talking about. Maybe the Bucks throw these guys in. I mean, just the fact that we're talking about it, I think means the Bucks season is essentially over.
All right, we'll get Alex's picks for tonight's 3-game set. But first, this summer, you can go all in at Circa Las Vegas with the ultimate getaway package, just $400 all in. You'll get a 2-night stay at Circa, a $100 dining credit, a $100 beverage credit, and your very own daybed at Stadium Swim, where the party never stops. You get all that for just $400, resort fees and taxes included. This limited time offer is valid for stays between May 26th and September 4th. Don't miss out. Lock in your all-in summer package right now over at circalasvegas.com. Very much looking forward to heading out to Circa later this week. That is where I will be taking in the NFL draft. Always great deals over at circalasvegas.com. We got Alex Barutha on the Progressive guest line. He's helping us pick our way through this 3-game NBA slate. Alex, we got some low totals on the board tonight, including one of the lowest in recent memory. It might be the lowest of the entire season. No Jason Tatum. At least that's the expectation. He remains doubtful for the Celtics tonight. They're still 10.5-point home favorites, but this total all the way down to 196 at DraftKings. So how do we attack this game?
I think I would still take the Celtics on the spread. The total is really tough to say, over or under. You can see the team totals on the screen here. But Boston expected to score 103. Orlando expected to score 92, and I totally agree with the Orlando part of this equation, because I don't think they can generate effective offense outside of Paolo Banchero. And I know Franz had a good game, but I don't know. I don't necessarily trust him. His shot doesn't seem, especially from 3, just doesn't seem right. Yep. So I think some of this is Boston going to be able to have a great 3-point shooting night or just a great offensive night and break through their team total and score 115 points or something like that? And that almost feels more likely to me. So I think I would go over 196 because the number's so low and Boston can shoot threes, but the Tatum absence certainly matters.
Heat Cavs. He made it interesting for a little bit early on in the first half, but Cleveland pulled away late. What do you like in this Heat Cavs game?
I think I like the Heat on the spread here as 12.5-point underdogs. I was looking through the box score of this game, and like you mentioned, the Heat were in this, and then you look at the box score and you're like, I'm like, how could they lose this game? I'm looking at the shooting percentages and it really just came down to turnovers and offensive rebounds. And I think that's something that's very coachable, right? I think you can come out with a game plan to crash the defensive boards more. You can see how Cleveland's playing you, so you're going to be a little more careful with the ball. And I think there's some value on Miami here. I wouldn't bet them to win, but I think the number you're getting is pretty good at 12.5, given what we saw in game 1.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know you're looking at Paolo Banchero over 8.5 boards in that game. I like that one. That's in the Magic Celtics game. That should be plenty of available rebounds given that low total. And I know you're looking at Derek White over 21.5 points plus assists as well. We'll finish out with the game of the night. The NBA's done a good job kind of saving the best for last on a lot of these playoff nights so far. Warriors-Rockets. Ugly game 1 for Houston. Pretty ugly, honestly, offensively for Golden State as well. We saw a ton of turnovers. Rockets now up to 3.5-point favorites at home. And this is another one with a low total at 203.5. I know you're looking at Houston here on the side, Alex, and checking into some Fred VanVleet props as well.
Yeah, those two bets are a bit correlated because I don't think Fred VanVleet's going to shoot quite as badly as he did in game 1. His over 2.5 threes is pretty juiced to the over, but he went 2 for 13 in game 1. 8 of those were classified as wide open. And I think Houston was in this game, and I was very shocked that Ime Udoka pulled the lineup that got them back into the game, which was the super-sized lineup with Steven Adams, Amen Top. Everybody was in there. Jabari Smith was in there. I was shocked when he brought back in Jalen Green and he pulled Steven Adams. I understand maybe there's some coaching, decisions that you need to make behind that, but I think Houston unlocked a little bit of something in that game.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they can shoot better than 20% from three and have a more competitive game.
All right, there we have it. Fred VanVleet over 2.5 threes. Alex Barutha on the Houston Rockets to cover the 3, which you can still find out there at some shops. Also take a look at Amen Thompson over 2.5 blocks plus steals. Talking some Major League Baseball, Jeff Erickson's best bets coming up on the other side. You're watching Prop Points.
You're watching Prop Points on VSiN, the Sports Betting Network.
Time to close out the show with some Major League Baseball talk. We'll get all of Jeff Erickson's best bets for the night slate in a full day of Major League Baseball. We got 4 games ongoing. First game of the day has gone final. The Braves ended up coming back to win against the St. Louis Cardinals. Eli White with a big home run, a 3-run shot in the bottom of the 8th. That put the Braves up 4-1. That is our final. So the Atlanta Braves moved to 10-14. They've now won 5 of their last 6. Reds and Marlins still ongoing down in Miami. Reds up 3-2 in the top of the 7th. They have a runner on first. Yankees still up 4-1 on the Guardians. Carlos Rodon working on a nice day. He's got 7 strikeouts through 4 and a third. Phillies Mets still knotted up at 2. We're in the top of the 6th there. And the Tigers continue to lead the San Diego Padres 2-0. Just 1 hit on the board so far for San Diego. All right, Jeff, that brings us to the evening slate. And we were taking a look at the Seattle Mariners heading out to Boston. Red Sox minus 142 on the money line. We do have a high total here sitting at 10. Emerson Hancock going up against Sean Newcomb.
Yeah, and this is a really bad pitching matchup. I think this is the takeaway here. You notice the total. Over under of 10 in this game. It's not just the weather. It's not just Fenway. It's the pitchers, too. Hancock, 12.71 ERA. Meanwhile, Newcomb, 3.63 ERA, but a 1.90 whip. Newcomb hasn't made it through 5 innings pitched yet so far this season in his 4 starts. This is all set up to, it's going to be 1-0, of course, because I'm harping on all the bad pitching matchup. No, but Hancock's the guy that's in there for George Kirby. He's already been demoted 1 time. I like a couple of things here. I like the over 10, even though it's a pretty high number to try to eclipse. But if you really want to be specific, I'm going to go on the Boston side of this here. I'm going to take the over Boston 5.5 runs on the team total there, plus 114. You can get that at. If you're playing DFS tonight, you get the early start time slate there because it's before 7:00 Eastern. Sometimes that's not in the main slate, but I would do a Boston stack tonight too. I think this is. I think it's going to be a high scoring affair.
All right, speaking of high-scoring affairs, we could have another one in Chicago tonight, Jeff. Dodgers-Cubs. Saw the Cubs win a wild game in the bottom of the 10th. That was an 11-10 final on Tuesday night. Cubs now minus 115 on the money line. Total sitting at 9.5. We do know Matthew Boyd will be pitching for the Chicago Cubs. Do we know who's pitching for the Dodgers yet?
Still listed as undecided as of like 15 minutes ago when I last checked. RotoWire's projected stars, we always try to guess. It's Matt Sauer who would be getting the call up. This is a spot that they've been using to fill in for Blake Snell and going to the 6-man rotation. The problem is they keep on going through so many different pitchers in that spot. Landon Knack's gotten a chance at it a couple of times. They've tried like Justin Robleski. They've gone with another number of different options there. Ben Kasparius is a guy that could get stretched out at some points in time. He actually didn't pitch yesterday, so maybe he's a guy that is going to eat bulk innings even if he doesn't start. But point is, this Dodger bullpen is taxed, really taxed right now. Banda pitched yesterday. Vesia pitched yesterday. Yates pitched yesterday. Tanner Scott. They used a number of their key pitchers. Like Trinan is on the IL right now. Point is, this is a kind of a tough spot for the Dodgers. I think if this gets into it, you might even see a position player pitch in this one here if it gets to be that sort of way. Cubs have a really good offense. Dustin May gave up 10 hits against the Cubs. None of them were homers. The homers came later in the game on this one here. Matthew Boyd, on the other hand, the Dodgers are still weaker against left-handed pitchers, and Boyd went 6 innings last time against them, allowed 3 runs. So the very definition of quality start there, or the baseline definition, if you will. But it's also I like to dig into advanced stats. I look at handedness, WRC plus, but even that right now, there's a lot of volatility. The Dodgers went from an 80 WRC plus versus lefties to 87 after getting into Imanaga last night. So I'm just going to go with the over on this one here. I'm not going to pick a side. I do like the over 9.5 at -112. I'll go that route.
All right, there we have it. Blue Jays taking on the Astros in Houston. This one, -110, both sides on the money line. Total hanging around at 8.5. This is Bowden Francis going up against Ryan Gusto. And I will tell you, Jeff, I have Bowden Francis in my most important fantasy baseball league. Been tracking him pretty closely. The classic numbers say he's having a good season so far. But I know when you dig in on some of those advanced stats that you were just talking about, may paint a different picture.
So for you specifically, Nick, do not tune into the RotoWire baseball podcast that we hosted last night. Fred Zinke and I, who is a Toronto guy, by the way, too, we spent a good chunk of time talking Bowden Francis and Chris Bassett, a classic polarizing pitcher. You mentioned the baseline stats. The advanced ERA estimators are all negative, and the degree is the only thing they talk about here. Like his FIP ERA is 5.42. His expected ERA, which is a measure over by Fangraphs, is at 6.30. Bowden Francis's BABIP is 196, which is completely unsustainable. Average for batting, and BABIP means batting average of balls in play. Takes out some of the defense, takes out the strikeout stats. It's 196. Suggests he's been very lucky in terms of when he puts balls in play. Sometimes you can generate weak contact. There are some pitchers that do that on the regular basis. Francis hasn't proven to be that guy just yet. I think there's a correction coming. It's a question of a win. I know Houston hasn't exactly been punishing sides, but Isaac Paredes, to me, is one of those guys that's kind of interesting. You could do that. 4 homers at home so far, including one of those last night. Everyone said that Isaac Paredes, everyone in the fantasy industry at least, said that he'd love playing in Houston with that short porch down the left field line. And so far, everyone is right. He's slugging over 500 at home. Meanwhile, his opponent, Ryan Gusto, has made 5 innings in his last start, only 2 Ks. I like the Toronto WRC plus, Toronto's WRC plus versus righties is 85, 26 in MLB. So all of that points to me taking Houston on the money line, -110. I think that's a pretty good starting point.
Okay, there we go. And if you want to dive in on Isaac Paredes, +380 at DraftKings to hit a home run tonight. Let's move over to Rays Diamondbacks. Taj Bradley going up against Eduardo Rodriguez. I know this is another game, Jeff, where you're looking at that total, which sits at 9.
Yeah, I am. And for once, I'm not going to. So the way I feel pretty good about this slate, which means I'm going to get slaughtered probably. But Taj Bradley, first of all, very good pitcher. I like a lot of what Taj Bradley brings to the table. 2-1 ERA, 5.24 ERA. 2-1 record, 5.24 ERA so far. Had a tough outing. It was against the Yankees so far. I believe in Bradley's ability overall. I think he just ran in a couple of one tough matchup there against the Yankees. Ball was going out like crazy in that game, playing in Steinbrenner Field. Or playing in Arizona, you think, oh, Arizona's a launching pad. All the stats suggest otherwise. Arizona has a very good offense, but the ballpark is pretty neutral ever since they put in the humidor there. So you look at him, and then you look at the Rays. Offensively with the Rays, they've only played 4 road games so far, but they have a 68 WRC plus on the road, 23.9% strikeout rate against lefties. They're below average in WRC plus against lefties, which Eduardo Rodriguez is. Easy for me to say. Thus, I like the under 9 runs in this game. One other thing I want to point out on the slate tonight, Rangers Athletics, they went to 13 on that one there last night. The total was 9, and it was 10.5. Today it's only 9.5 because of the pitching matchup between JP Sears and Kumar Rocker. I keep liking that over. It's 9.5. I'll go over on that game as well.
Yeah, I got an interesting pitching matchup out in San Francisco. Also, Brewers put up 11 runs last night in a win, but we got Freddie Peralta and Logan Webb. So very low total on the board in that Brewers-Giants game. That one sitting at 6.5. It's time for our G-Bank Best Bets of the night. They're brought to you by G-Bank, the official bank of VSiN. G-Bank is up in the ante with up to a $750 bonus for new G-Bank Visa Signature Card customers. New customers who spend $1,000 on eligible purchases within 90 days from opening their account receive a $250 bonus. And if you spend $50K on gaming, sports app loads within 30 days, you'll receive another $500 bonus. Add it up, potentially $750 in bonuses coming your way. You can apply now at vsin.com/gbank. That's vsin.com/gbank. Subject to credit approval. Terms and conditions apply. Jeff, you got all these baseball bets out there, all these baseball games tonight, and yet your best bet comes from the NBA?
Yeah. I kind of like the Celtics minus 10.5 at minus 110. I know Jason Tatum's not going to play. I still think everything went nearly perfectly for Orlando, and they still got blown out in game one. I think the Celtics are, accustomed to playing without one of their stars. They're such a deep team. I think they still roll.
Okay, there we have it. There's a reason they are still double-digit favorites at home, even without one of the 5 or 6 best players in the NBA. I'm going to that game as well. I'm taking Derek White over 21.5 points plus assists, minus 130 at BetMGM. Sees about a 5 percentage point jump in usage rate, averages about 6 more points and assists per 36 minutes with Jason Tatum off the court this season. All right, that's going to wrap it for today's edition of Prop Points. Make sure you stick around. Make it rain with Adam Shine coming up next. He's going to have former NFL GM Mike Tannenbaum on to preview the NFL draft. So keep it here on VSiN.